subject comes from the fact that I work with an Islamic political group called Hizb ut-Tahrir, and I've been studying this issue and speaking about it for a very long time. So I give you a different perspective to our two respected speakers beforehand, but there is a big overlap in what all three of us are saying. So the first thing I say is, take note of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to us, to all of us, when He addresses us in the Quran after A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, believers, so He's talking to us. Qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nar. Save yourself and your families from fire. Which fire? That fire that Allah says, وَقُودَهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. The fuel of that fire is people, human beings, and stones. So Allah puts a duty on you and me, for our children, that we have to try and save ourselves first and foremost, and our children, our wives, our family, our husbands, our aunt, from the fire. So we have to do whatever we can, number one. Number two, how you do that depends on what achieves the result. Okay, there isn't just one thing you have to do in this. So I look at the TV, I look at those brothers and sisters in Birmingham protesting outside the schools. And I think to myself, honestly, I think, mashallah, they are very brave and sincere people who are taking all the abuse from the media, who's characterizing them as being mob and this and that, when actually all they're doing is standing outside the school with a piece of cardboard in their hand, saying they're against what's going on in the school. But that's the situation they've been forced into. It doesn't mean that that's the situation you will be forced into. Okay? Allah forbid, if you're forced into that, then don't care what the world thinks of you, just like Sheikh says, care what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinks of you. Okay? But if you take the advice which the Brother Bashar, the lawyer, has given us, you'll understand that the first thing you do is start that dialogue with the school. Because I can tell you as a professional, as a doctor, teachers will be in the same boat, policemen will be in the same boat. Nobody likes to break a relationship with the people they have to deal with. In medicine, we talk about the relationship between the doctor and the patient. If the trust is gone, everything's gone. Doesn't matter if I'm giving you the right medicine. If you don't trust me, you think I'm giving you poison. And it's the same in the school, it's the same with the policeman. They rely on building the trust between the professional and the family. So start off with them that you don't want to end up in the situation like Birmingham. You want to work with them so they respect you as a community here who has strong beliefs, whilst they try and comply with whatever boxes they have to tick for the state. Unfortunately, you will get some teachers who have a mission that they want to spread this fitna, okay? But most teachers you will find are not like that, actually, inshallah. The second bit of news I want to give you, which is, you can say bad news, okay? This is going to sound like bad news, but I think, you know, it's worth knowing the scale of the challenge, right? It's not that you have to walk down the road. It's not that you have to walk down up a small hill in Bedford, right? We have a mountain to climb on this. Our brother said you can't get away from this teaching. They've made it law from September next year. They've made it compulsory in primary school and in secondary school. And you know what? It's not just LGBT. The LGBT aspect is the thing that has become most obvious to us. This is a problem for us and our children. But those of you who actually bothered to get engaged with your children in what they're learning in school will know that before all of this became law, they teach your children that it doesn't matter if men and women are in a relationship together if they're not married. They teach them that. That's part of the system. The only thing that matters is they're consenting. The only things that matters is that they stay healthy and they use contraception. That's what they're teaching our children. So if you weren't realizing that before, then you need to realize it now. If you weren't realizing it's not just sex and relationship education, it's throughout the curriculum. So how many of you actually thought that in the science lessons they teach your children that people are descended from animals, from apes, the evolution theory? And how many of you questioned that? How many of you challenged that? How many of you had a discussion with your children? Honestly, my belief, I once gave a talk to young people about religious studies in school. You know religious study, you've got young people here. Yeah? You do, if you're in mainstream school and you study religious studies, they teach you about Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism. I tell you, the one thing you learn from those classes is, what's the point of this religion? If there's so many of them, how can any of them be right? What relevance do they have in my life today? And they leave young people with more confusion than clarity. So, the challenge we have for saving our families from the fire is more than just political campaigns, more than just protest, more than just even dealing with the sex and relationship education. It is that you and I have to set up things in our local community which are there for the need of 21st century in this country. Our parents' generation set up the masajid and madrasas. MashaAllah, we have good hifz programs in our masajid now. Our kids know how to make wudu, they know how to pray, they know how to fast. They know how to read Quran. Many have memorized Quran. Many have memorized Quran with excellent tajweed. But the 21st century Muslim in Britain, young Muslim, has questions that need to be answered. May have even doubts that need to be answered. Doubts about how we came to be. How do I know? How can I be sure Allah exists? How can I know if this evolution theory is wrong? If the teacher at school says that two men or two women want to, just in their own private life, without harming anybody else, have a relationship, what's wrong with that? Then if they have those questions, where can they get those answers today? I tell you, in plenty of masajid, even though it's against the law to take out the danda, the teacher will feel like taking out the danda when they hear those questions. Partly because the teachers, some of the teachers, don't know how to answer this stuff. They don't. That's a fact. In some of my travels around the country, I've come across 2-3 places where they have excellent curriculums, tarbiyah curriculums for the youth, which address these things systematically. And they do something unique. They teach not just, because our imams know the Islam better than I do, better than you do, right? Better than the teachers of those tarbiyah curriculums. They don't just teach the Islam though. Believe it or not, you have to teach the kufr. It sounds crazy, but unless your children can recognize what's wrong as well as what's right, they're not going to get the answer. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لا إكراه في الدين. There's no compulsion in the deen. قد تبين رشد من الغي. Allah's made the rushd, the guidance, the clear path separate from the misguidance. فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ. And whoever rejects the taghut and believes in Allah, فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى لَا انْفِصَامَ لَهَا. Then Allah will give him a firm handhold. No one can break it. So, just as in the time of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and Allah revealed the Quran, and so many examples where He gave about the idols that the mushrikeen were worshipping. Why do you worship this thing? It doesn't benefit you, it doesn't harm you, it can't hear you, it can't feed you, it can't provide for you, it can't protect you. So it's clear, you reject the taghut. And why don't you believe in Allah? Allah is the one who created you, He provides for you, He clothes you, He feeds you. the Prophet ﷺ, he did both. And we need to be clear how we do this here. And in this issue of, I want to spend a little time just giving you just one little example on this issue of sex and relationship education, of what I mean. Because I want, like Sheikh says, I want our young people not just to be able to defend their deen, defend what they understand and understand it well. I want them to be able to invite other people to it. Because we should be able to show, for us, we look at some of this stuff and we think, are they going mad? Are they absolutely going mad? We say in the Quran, there are two genders, two sexes, male and female. Everybody knows that. Actually, as a doctor, I can tell you, there are some children who are born where the anatomy of the body is not born properly, not developed properly, and it's not clear. When they look under the nappy of the baby, you can't tell if it's a boy or a girl. That happens sometimes, okay? And actually the Sharia gives us an answer for that. Even the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave advice on that, and fuqaha have given advice on that you make the best judgment you can, and you bring them up either as a boy or as a girl. And the only time you change that is if, when they reach maturity, if it's obvious somebody you brought up as a boy starts to have monthly bleeding, you realize there's a mistake. And you might do an operation then to correct those things. But you know how rare that is? I've been a doctor for 28 years, and a student for 5 years before that, so 33 years in the medical field. I've never even seen a single case or heard of a single case of something like this. It's pretty rare, okay? What's called this intersex abnormality is pretty rare. But the advice in Sharia is bring them up, basically male or female. How many genders do you think they've defined nowadays, today? Does anyone know? The kind of numbers they say there are nowadays. I read one report recently that said that they say there are 63 different genders. I don't know how you even invent 63 different genders. It's just like crazy. Actually, even very liberal people, if any of you have heard of a woman called Germaine Greer, right? She is like she's this feminist who in the 1960s and 1970s, they used to love this woman because she was like the champion of feminism. But nowadays, she said, you know what? In her belief, if somebody wants to have an operation to change their sex from male to female, she doesn't say to stop them. She's liberal. She doesn't believe. But she said, I won't call them a woman. I won't call them a woman because they're not. It's insulting to me as a woman to call a man who wears a dress and takes hormones a woman. And they condemned her for that. But she says this is crazy. How can you expect me to call somebody a woman who's not? Yeah, so many people see the excesses of this. They use false arguments. They say it's natural. You'll find examples in animals, in penguins, in different animals of same-sex relationships. So when does the animal rule for animals be the rules for humans? Animals do many things that humans don't do. Some animals, when they go to the toilet, excuse me kids when I say this, some animals, they eat their own poo. And that's normal for them. A rabbit eats its own poo. That's normal for them. That doesn't make it normal for people. They say this is genetic. Actually, even that's disputed. This week there was an article that came out disputing this. They say it's genetic. Well, many things can be genetic. Actually, the paedophiles argue that they are attracted to children because they say that's genetic, it's natural for them. Does that make it right? It doesn't make it right, does it? They say it should be okay if two people consent. So if me and him consent to kill each other, does that make it right? Consent by itself doesn't make something right. So there are loads of false arguments that are brought about this issue. And in the end, it boils down to this. They genuinely believe that if people are individuals are free to do what they want, that's good. That's best for society, right? And we genuinely don't believe that. We genuinely believe that if I as an individual do something bad, it can harm the society. Why do I believe it? Because the Prophet ﷺ told us this. It's a very beautiful hadith in Sahih Bukhari actually, which you know is very under mentioned in our communities. Rasulullah ﷺ said, مثل القائم على حدود الله وواقع فيها كمثل قوم استحموا على سفينة. The example of a community of people is like a group of people who are going onto a ship. فأصاب بعضهم أعلاها وبعضهم أسفلها. And some of them in the ship, they're on the top deck, and some of them, they're on the lower deck. وكان الذين في أسفلها إذا استقوا من الماء مروا على من فوقهم. So the people on the bottom deck, when they have to go and get water, they have to pass by the people upstairs to go and get water, to come down. So then they say, فقالوا, the ones on the bottom floor, they say this, لو أنا خرقنا في نصيبنا خرقا ولم نؤذي من فوقنا. They say, if we drill a hole in the bottom of the boat to get our water, then we won't have to disturb the people upstairs. And Rasulullah said, on this example he's given us, he said, فَإِنْ يَتْرَكُوهُمْ وَمَا أَرَادُوا هَلَكُوا وَحَلَكُوا جَمِيعًا. And if we let them do what they wanted to, they will be destroyed and we'll all be destroyed. وَإِنْ أَخَذُوا عَلَى أَيْدِيهِمْ نَجَوْا وَنَجَوْا جَمِيعًا. And if we stop them by their hands, if we hold their hands, then they will be saved and we'll all be saved. It's the truth. These liberal sexual relationships, I don't just say the LGBT ones, I say all of them. These sexual relationships between men and men, women and women, men and women, which are outside what we say is a lawful Sharia marriage, lawful marriage, they cause problems in the society, not just for those individuals, but for everyone. Listen to this. In 1 year in this country, there are over 400,000 sexually transmitted infections. 400,000. In 1 year in this country, there's almost 200,000, 2 lakh abortions. Killing of the pregnancy to prevent a birth. You know, they talk about Me Too. Have you heard this expression, Me Too? When like women are saying that when men have like sexually harassed them, and they're saying hashtag Me Too, because so many women feel that they've been harassed by men. Unbelievable figures. In 1 year, it's estimated 500,000 women in this country report sexual abuse. In 1 year, 500,000 and 130,000 men in 1 year. That's the harm that comes from these kind of relationships. Like Sheikh says, procreation, intimate relationships, marriage, it doesn't just give comfort and pleasure to families. It propagates the species. It means the human race continues. You know, they have a figure. They say you need to have 2.2 children for every 1 adult in a society for the population to stay stable. If that falls, if you get 2 children to 1 adult, then over time, the number of people in the society will shrink. And when they look at Europe as a whole, they say, you know what? The population of Europe is shrinking. Except for, alhamdulillah, the Muslim community in Europe, which is having more than 2.2 children per adult. So we're keeping the population of Europe alive at the moment, because otherwise it's going down, and the species will die out. And you know, you hear these debates in this country. They say there's all these old people, and there are not enough young people to look after them and pay for the pensions. Why is that? Because since the 1960s, people have separated the sexual relationship from having a family. And it's just for pleasure of the individuals and for no other purpose. And you have a problem in society that they can't solve. We have families breaking down, we have knife crime. And when somebody commits a crime, what's the thing they say? Where are the parents for the children? Well, there are no parents. If you're telling parents they don't need to marry, they don't need to be free, if you're telling people that they don't have to take responsibility, you will have a mess in society. And that's what we have. And by contrast, this is the taghut we have to reject. This is this is the taghut we have to reject. And by contrast, what does Allah and His Messenger tell us? Be conscious of Him, have taqwa. Don't be free to do what you want. Fear Allah. The dunya is because you're going to be accounted in the akhirah. Lower your gaze. Don't encourage this agitation of your nafs. Don't encourage that. Look down, look away. Don't separate men and women where you can, when it's not necessary. We know if you're in the family, if you have you're meeting your uncles, your aunties, your cousins, this is different. This is silatul raham. This is keeping the ties of relationship. We know in the marketplace, you can't separate people necessarily, medical care, these things. But like this gathering, or like in other social gatherings and things like that, separate men and women so you don't constantly agitate this sexual instinct. Don't approach zina. Don't do anything even to get close to zina. So if holding hands and kissing and this sort of thing leads on to something worse, don't even go down that road. Encourage marriage. We should be encouraging and making it easier for young people to marry, not harder. And then actually in the proper Islamic society, in the proper Islamic system, where you have a legal framework as well, that if people cross these boundaries, then Allah and His Messenger gave punishments for these, because these become crimes. Okay, but this is not relevant for us here. But we should understand the system Allah gave. And actually, you'd see, you know what? On a society level, this would be a much better society. You won't have women screaming out, me too, and 140,000 men as well screaming this out. You won't have that kind of society where there's constant agitation and leading to fitna. You'll have a society where people have families and the families look after each other, and it is the family is like the brick of a building. It's the foundation of a building. Society is built on its families. If you have families that are broken apart, men and men, women and women, temporary relationships, it's not a brick, it's sand. It's like sand that builds the bricks. It just falls apart in your hand. And this is a disaster for people here. Maybe it is the Muslim community that can make people wake up a little bit here. In Birmingham,